Thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar, Will It Assemble? I'm Joy and I'm the marketing manager here at Innovia, and joining me is Aldine, one of our technical functional consultants, and Larry, who was one of our senior application consultants. Before we get started, I want to call attention to the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If any time throughout the presentation you have any questions, please feel free to put those in that box and we will get to them as soon as we can. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Al, Dean, and Larry.
Thanks,
Hi,
Joy.
everybody.
Hello, everybody. Larry, do you want to
Hi,
introduce
everybody.
yourself first?
Sure. So first of all, I'll start off with an apology. We had the slide deck built a long time ago, and I still haven't fixed Aldine's name. I just noticed it again now, so I'm going to apologize right now. My name is Larry Letourneau. I've been with Innovia for 3 years now, but I've been working with the Business Central platform for the last 25 years, and I'm an operations consultant. Aldine?
While I forgive Larry for his sins, my name is Aldine Simmons-Thorpe, and I'm a technical functional consultant. Like Larry, I've spent a lot of time working with the product from Nav into BC, and now I dabble in both the application and the technical side of things, all things BC. So we're excited to have you join us for Will It Assemble?
So, if you want, Aldine, I'll start off with this. So, the main point here is will it assemble? So we want to talk about what the differences are between the two main areas of Business Central and basically how you make things. So there are production orders and assembly orders. So production orders are basically purchase materials that you use to make into manufactured items. Now that being said, there's many different levels of production where you can make sub-assemblies, but ultimately you're taking these purchase materials, combining them in a way, and then making a finished product. Some of the key features obviously there are you've got many different levels of statuses. So depending on the complexity of your organization and your processes, you can just deal with released and finished production orders. So basically release being what you're working on, finished being the finished product. Or you can expand that and use simulated and planned and firm planned and build a whole process of manufacturing from start to finish. The different items or components that are involved are obviously your items, your production bombs or bill of materials, routings, and then machine centers and work centers. So it can be very complex, and it can involve a lot of different moving parts. Benefits obviously being efficient management of the processes and detailed tracking and control over production stages. That's as opposed to assembly orders. Aldine, if you want to talk about those.
Sure. Basically, your assembly orders, I don't want to say are the opposite of your production, but are a more simplified version of your production orders. I like to think of the assembly process as a very clean, you're putting together a kit. So you've defined what needs to be included, how it will be put together. There's no deviation. There's no waste. If you're interchanging parts, you're not recording that you are clearly identifying a set list of items that you're including, and then you're putting that together in this way you've defined. No variations, no deviations. It is what you get. And stark contrast to production that allows you to, as Larry mentioned, all these other creative things where you can record waste, you can have sub-assemblies, you can have additional components included in there. But in assembly, it's very straightforward. Now, you could have an item that is produced, also part of an assembly bomb. However, for assembly, it is really a specific list of items in the quantities you've defined, making exactly the finished good that you have defined. That's your key right there.
Okay. So we came up with the idea of let's test some different ideas of whether something would be an assembly or a production. So easy example, a desk. Would you assemble it or would you produce it? Standard out of the box, obviously you would think assemble. You get a lot of component items. You're basically putting it together. There's not much to it. It's not very complex. But you could also take it down the road of production as well, because it can become complex depending on the different variations of the desk, the various components, but also in your ability to track. As Aldine pointed out, is you could have what's called sub-assemblies to produce different parts that go into the desk. You could track your costs, you could track your components. Uh, it could go different both routes quite easily. So that's one example.
Let's take another
Aldine?
one. Let's see if a seasonal gift basket, would that be an assembly or production? Well, let's talk about that. Your seasonal gift basket could easily comprise of your purchased items, right? You'll purchase things seasonally, or maybe you've got inventory that you want to get rid of, or nicely package out in a gift basket. In that case, assembly might be the easiest fit, right? You've got a set one of this, two of this. You've got a bill of materials or an assembly list of items and the quantities that you would include. However, if the seasonal gift baskets contain things that might be breakable, there might be some slight variations in what you include, right? You're able to, define a set number of items or SKUs that will be included in the assembly, but you may have some that are not so great anymore. You might want to account for, um, you know, overages, right? After putting those baskets together, you've got things left over. That might be a good candidate for production order instead of assembly. What else will we assemble, Larry?
Well, again, let's talk about food manufacturing. Would you ever use assemblies for that? So that's
100%.
very complex. A lot of times that's why production orders are used for food manufacturing. But as Aldine just said, you can actually use assembly orders for food manufacturing as well. Very similar to the gift basket idea that Aldine mentioned. Food baskets where you are taking, raw materials, you're taking, different pieces of fruit, different confectionaries, and you're assembling them into a gift basket or a end product. So that's one of the areas where we talk about where it could be a mix of it, where what started out as production orders uh, then produce a lot of finished goods, and then those finished goods are taken and assembled into another product as well.
No, great point. Now, product complexity, as you mentioned, is a great um, I would say, factor in determining whether it will assemble or not. So assembly typically is designed for finished goods, right? So you've got finished components or purchased components that you're essentially putting together. So you don't require a lot of routings. There aren't work centers involved. Think of it also similar to an assembly line, right? People at a desk or people, putting together, pieces one behind the other in an assembly format, if you will. Typically, a bill of materials with limited labor involved. Whereas with manufacturing, it's a little bit more structured, right? There's multiple steps, more complex steps. You'll have steps linked more to work centers. So you'll have a designated spot or place for activities to take place. You'll want to track cost of equipment that might be included in the assembly, as well as a breakdown of the labor. You might want to do things like scheduling. So in that case, manufacturing would probably be a better suit for that. While it might assemble, just because of the requirements of how the item is produced, you might opt to go for a manufacturing instead of the assembly. Assembly will definitely be simpler, be more cost effective, but your manufacturing will likely be more detailed, provide better reporting, but also allow you to capture the complexity of creating a finished good.
Thanks, Aldine. Here's another one, computers. What do you think, Aldine? What do you think it would be off the top of your head?
We could assemble a computer, but
Yep.
we want to, especially in Business Central.
Well, here's the thing. Computers is a very broad topic. So obviously, computer parts, the inner workings, very often are used for manufacturing, right? So if you're doing a circuit board, that probably would involve manufacturing, right? It's very complex processes where you would have to set up probably work centers, production schedules, that sort of thing. So it would add a lot of complexity. But once you have all those different parts, then I feel that assembly is probably the best route to go in Business Central. You've got fewer configurations. Most computers, very plug and play, where you can take different parts and put them together to make a different end product. Another thing is it's very customizable for the end user. So customers can actually order by the part and tell you, I want part A, part B, and part C. Please make me a computer. So that's where the power of assembly comes in. You can make it to order where you don't actually have to have any finished goods in stock. You have all the different component parts, and then you do an assembled order. So basically, you sell the end product, and that tells you what parts to go and take, put them together in a finished good product, and then shipped off to the customer. So you're not bogged down by product production complexities. It's very agile for the end user or for the customer, or sorry, for the manufacturer. So I would agree, assembly is the way to go in something like computers.
Very good point there, Larry. And oftentimes people think that you have to go one or the other, but as you accurately pointed out, it could be a combination of both. For one component or for a couple of components, it could be a scenario where we've got a production order, so it's going to be manufactured. And for other components, it could be assembly, where it is assembled. So the requirements of how it needs to be produced and how complex the production needs to be is definitely a factor in determining if it will in fact assemble. Another piece, as you called out, your make to stock, make to order, is that inventory complexity, right? Do you actually have complex supply chains linked to providing the components? Think of things like branded clothing or even light fixtures, right? There's a whole supply chain involved in producing those items. And so perhaps from an inventory standpoint, it might make sense to manufacture. Maybe you will manufacture parts of the fixture. Maybe you will import in parts of the fixture and combine that with a piece that you've manufactured. Or it could be an assembly in the case of, let's say, branded clothing, where you could already have your t-shirts as part of your inventory. And so the value add that you would be providing would be, adding a logo to it. And so that's a part of your assembly process. So really, depending on your inventory, how you manage it, whether you're stocking or making, and how your supply chain is supported, could also make a difference between whether you decide to set it up as manufactured or you're going to set that up to assemble.
All great points. To expand on that as well, and it does work its way into the complexity question of this, using branded clothing as the example that Aldine brought up. One thing to point out is, what if some of those steps in the process aren't handled by you as a producer? So subcontracting, for instance. So you make the clothing up to a certain part or point, and then in that process, you have to outsource part of it. That's something that's not really usable in the assembly process. They don't have built-in subcontracting. So definitely that's where it would add the complexity would add a step where the manufacturing process might be the right way to go. Again, all the different steps can be handled manually, right? You could assemble to a certain point, ship it off, bring it back. All that's done manually. It's added overhead on the users and on your process. Whereas in the production order process, it could be built right into the process easily. And also, again, that complexity breaks down to the costs, and being able to track that sort of thing for your products wouldn't be easily done in assemblies, but it is built into the production process for sure.
Excellent points, Larry. And one of the reasons why will it assemble becomes a key question, right? A lot of these items, it's not, as we have been highlighting, not an easy yes or no, but does take some amount of consideration. And for each business, it will be different. For some companies, branded clothing could in fact be manufacturing based on how it is produced, while in other cases, it might in fact be assembly, depending again on how they decide to produce that. So not as easy.
Yep. And like Aldine hinted at, it does come down to your business, right? Of is it cost effective, right? Depending on the size of your business, is it cost effective to actually go down the manufacturing route or the assembly route? If you have very low volume of production, assembly is often more cost effective, right? You don't need all the different levels of functionality that manufacturing offers. I mentioned those earlier. It's the different levels of the manufacturing process, where you can have simulated orders and planned orders all the way through to the released and finished side. If that's very complex, given the size of your business and your operations, it's overhead that you probably don't need, right? It's something that you could aspire to and grow into, and maybe you start off at the assembly process while your business grows to the size where all of a sudden maybe you do need to shift at that point to manufacturing. And then the other part I mentioned before is your costing and your tracking features manufacturing. You're able to do a lot more at that level with manufacturing, where if your margins are very tight, you have to go that level so that you can make sure that you're actually being as profitable as possible.
Spot on indeed. Whether you're small or medium or large size company definitely will play into if you want to set up assembly or manufacturing. If you've definitely got a 2-person team, probably manufacturing is overkill. However, if you've got a more robust setup, as Larry mentioned, that might be a better plan for your business. Which brings us to another key component of Will It Assemble. It comes down to maintenance, right? When we talk about things like your item setup in Business Central, there are lots of different ways to configure an item in Business Central. And a part of that configuration also requires maintenance, right? If you set up an item, you've got a BOM, you've got routings, you've got substitutes, you've got variations, you've got SKUs. That's a lot of complexity to maintain, a lot of data to manage, coupled with your planning parameters and warehousing components that you can define on your item as well. That definitely adds to your complexity within the system. Now, if you're doing manufacturing, we mentioned your BOMs and routings, etc. Now that also becomes a part of your maintenance. However, if you've got a smaller setup, which is typically what assembly will be, right? If it's more straightforward from an item setup, assembly might be more user-friendly. If you've got, very few SKUs, low complexity, easy to identify variations, perhaps assembly might be more user-friendly and a great way to start until, as Larry mentioned, you get a little bit more complex in terms of your process, and then decide that you want to track more of your steps in the process. Maybe you want to capture cost. You want to get a better idea of what your work in progress looks like versus finished goods. You want to track variations in your component items, right? So you can track which variations or which SKUs are more profitable. Once we get into more of that reporting and slicing of dicing of your data, then at that point, the juice might be worth the squeeze to get into that complex manufacturing setup. However, if you're just trying to get product out the door and document a BOM, track your BOM, get your components in and out, and account for the labor included in the transformation, perhaps assembly is all you need.
All very good points, Aldine. Another aspect to look at, and Aldine hinted at, is just ease of use, right? So if the assembly is more user friendly, right? It's very straightforward. It's adding parts A, B, and C to make finished product D. The benefit here is that it's much easier to learn for staff, right? So if you're in an industry where you hire seasonal staff or if you have high turnover, assembly is a lot easier for users to pick up and run with than manufacturing. Now, like Aldine said, it's got a high level of complexity, even at the lower levels, that assemblies simply do not have. Another good part of assemblies, obviously, and I hinted that earlier, is your inventory and how much inventory you need to keep. So if you have a lot of parts that are used in a lot of different finished assemblies, right, then within the assembly process, you're going to decide, are we going to assemble to order or assemble to stock, right? The difference being, do we build up an inventory level of finished assembled goods, or do we leave things in their component stages and then when we get demand for them, we move forward with producing those. So obviously that's a lot more flexible, but it all depends on what your end product is, right? If you don't offer a lot of variations onto your finished goods, then you can go for the assemble to stock, assuming that you have the warehousing capability to store that. Manufacturing can be complex, right? It's got the tracking, it's got the reporting, it's suitable for businesses that have large scale operations, but it could be a burden if you move too quickly into that stage, right? As Aldine mentioned, maybe you start off as assembly and then once you get to a certain level, you move to manufacturing, but you don't have to feel like you have to start with manufacturing right away, right? You could build yourself towards it. Uh, and when you get to that certain level where you want to start looking at the different numbers and increase or reducing your costs and increasing your profitability at the part level, that's when you can make that move into manufacturing.
Spot on. So our 5 main components are, if we go down our checklist of will it assemble, you want to consider product complexity, right? The next thing you want to consider is operational overhead and setup, right? Third, you want to consider inventory management complexity, and Larry's jumped to cost effectiveness. No,
I went
I
too
think you
far.
have
I'm
them
sorry.
all
There you go.
good.
They're out
So
of
you got
order.
that. Exactly. You've got the inventory management complexity as well. Then, of course, your cost effectiveness. So whether you're a small to medium size or a larger business, definitely want to consider what that looks like. And then finally, ease of use and maintenance, right? Make it easy. If you can't have your team consistently following your process or having a process that is easy to follow and limits user error, then you're likely going to be sending in a lot of support tickets, that's for one. But also, you are probably over designing or over engineering your system for the process you actually have, right? So let's decide, what's the best combination of getting the reporting and tracking that you need, as well as completing the process in the system so you get consistent data, good data, that in turn yields to better information in your ERP. And of course, having it work for you. So as we wrap up, we got some hot takes, right? Why assemble? Your operations focus on, for your operations, the focus is on simply assembly, right? So it's easy. As Larry said, it's A plus B equals C. So think of our gift baskets are really easy. If you're putting a laptop into a case and into a packet, that's probably a really good case for assembly. You don't have as much detail, right? You're literally tracking the movement of one or two or several items into a kit or a tool for all items that you will ship out together. Typically done on the warehouse floor. So you're able to pick your items, package them together, or kit them and send them out, right? So it's not as detailed, doesn't require all those different machine centers, work centers, that type of involvement. It is very streamlined, right? It is a very simple, I need X amount of these into X amount of that. And so it's cost effective. So there's not a lot of setup that is required. You've got your clean item data set up in your system. You've got a clear, potentially a work instruction for the user, and the movement of the items from picking to getting them into the assembly to getting them out the door. Very streamlined, very cost effective. I want to hear Larry's hot takes. Why we manufacture?
Thanks, Aldine. So as Aldine mentioned about assemblies, take it a bit further, and that's when you walk into the manufacturing world. There's more intricacies, right? There's production workflows, there's different levels, you have multi-step processes. And as I mentioned earlier, it could also involve subcontracting where some of those processes aren't even done in-house. You need to take them outside, have it done and then brought back, and then further move the process along. And then probably the biggest win for manufacturing, the detailed costing and the reporting you get out of it, right? You can when your margins are tight and you need to look at your costs at the penny level, manufacturing is definitely the way to go at that point because you can break everything down. There's production bomb versions and routing versions where you can actually start looking at hypothetical situations and testing it out to see, okay, what if we make these small changes? How would that affect profitability? So if your process is complex, or if your requirements at the end of the day are more complex, then obviously manufacturing is probably the route you want to take. The way I like to look at it, obviously, is, assembly orders. Let's put it in terms of food. Aldine and I both like food. Assembly orders, you've got your sandwiches, right? You've got your different components, you're putting them all together. You can swap things in and out depending on who you're giving the sandwich to and produce a good product that makes them happy. Manufacturing is more of the beef Wellington, right? The intricate recipes where there's multiple steps. You're still adding different components, but you're doing different things to them at different stages. And then the end result is something that's a lot more complex in terms of production and flavor. Uh, but again, you end up with a happy customer. In both avenues, that's the end goal.
Very yummy comparisons there, Larry, making me think about old beef Wellington right now. But this is good.
So obviously, good and not a good quote. Manufacturing is more than just putting parts together. And again, as we said, assembly isn't necessarily that, but it is more that than anything else. And so we just wanted to thank you guys for coming out to our presentation. And if you have any questions, obviously you can reach out to us at Innovia, and we'll be happy to help you guys out.
Indeed. Thank you all.
If you are interested in reading blogs, case studies, watching on-demand webinars, and more, please head to our resources page. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you at a future Innovia webinar.